So I often see people arguing about what's the best way to learn jiu-jitsu. Some people say that the best way to learn is to focus on learning big principles and concepts that can be used in multiple situations rather than memorizing a bunch of different techniques. While other people take an extreme analytical approach and they try to break everything down into systems and algorithms so that they have an answer for every different situation. In my opinion, I think one of these is absolutely the best method. However, they both do have merit. And if you aren't maximizing each of these learning methods, both as a student or if you're a coach, you'll seriously limit the speed in which you can develop for both yourself and your students. So before going into which one of these I think is superior, I want to explain context first for each one of these and where they're strong and where they're weak, so you can understand where each method has strengths and weaknesses and then decide for yourself which one you prefer. So let's start off with understanding systems and organized learning first. So in my opinion, systems work best in situations where there's a low amount of variables. If you think of chess, you can calculate ahead when there's limited options. If I have checkmate in 2 moves and I call check on my opponent, he has to move out of check. That's the rules of the game. And if there's only 2 or 3 possible moves for him to get out of check, I can actually calculate each one and decide on what is the absolute best next move. So this means if you study a position well enough and that situation happens in a match, you can have an exact pre-planned answer for the situation, which both helps with you not freezing in the match because you already know what to do when the situation occurs, but you can also high rep drill these positions to even prepare your muscle endurance and timing for these positions so you're really prepared for when they happen. So this method is extremely strong, but it starts to fail when your problem becomes too large or there's too many variables. If we're dealing with something like finishing an armbar, we can break that down to a couple different situations. But if you're dealing with something as broad as passing the open guard as a whole, there's maybe millions of options. His legs could be high, they could be low, wide legs, he could be sitting up, leaning on his left, leaning on his right. There's so many things to calculate. You can't say for sure what the best move is. If you were playing chess, even the world's most powerful supercomputer still cannot tell you what the best first move is in chess. A quick simple example would be if I have a new student and I'm trying to teach them how to pass the guard, it's much easier and much more effective for me to just tell them, get around the legs and hold them, than it would be for me to try to sit down and break down a hypothetical if-then based upon every possible situation their opponent could be in. Not only is it going to be overwhelming and frustrating, but it's going to give them analysis paralysis when they roll. So a simple model of get around the legs is actually a much better tool in the beginning for someone. Again, using a chess analogy, nowadays computers can always beat humans, but even up to around 20 years ago, humans were still able to beat computers sometimes despite how many more decisions they could make. And the reason is that when they looked at most top chess players playing, with almost immediately they eliminated 95% of the move options because they had basic principles that they would follow. In chess, these principles are things like don't move the same piece twice because you're wasting moves. Always keep your king protected. These are general guidelines or rules that you can follow that help allow you to eliminate a lot of bad possible decisions. So because we can generate really useful, simple principles we can follow, we can truncate and eliminate 90% of the options in a situation, which makes you able to make much faster, quick decisions in situations you may not have ever even been in before. In jiu-jitsu, principles like this will manifest as things like distance creates leverage on your opponent. Your opponent needs to take away distance to be able to pass the guard. Your opponent cannot pass your guard if both shoulder blades are not pinned to the mat. Or there can never be a guard pass if your feet are somewhere in between your chest and your opponent's chest. So these don't tell you exactly where to be in every situation, but often when you're in trouble, these quick little principles can help you come up with fast, creative solutions to problems by just following those general truths. However, the other side of this is you have to be careful of principles that are not entirely true. In fact, sometimes principles can be more counterproductive than helpful. If you're trying to use a principle that's not always true, sometimes it inhibits you from making moves that you need to do. An example of how this can be counterproductive is a rule like always have your elbows tight. Of course, if I overextend my arm in certain situations, he might be able to come up and triangle choke me or armbar me, But also there's a lot of times where if I'm in guard and he has a De La Riva hook, pushing on this leg and straightening my arm gives me a lot of leverage to trap a leg and set up different guard passes and attacks. So it's very contextual when I need to have my elbows tight, when I need to have them extended. And often I see people trying to pass the guard and they're approaching all boxed up like this, and it makes them very restricted. And if they actually relax and stretch their legs straight, push when they need to, keep their arms tight when they need to, they can be more adaptable in passing the guard. Another easy example of this is always have posture. Of course, sometimes posture helps you keep your balance. And if he's here and he breaks my grip and postures up, he may have a lot of balance. But in certain situations, if I have this Kyotera ankle lock grip and he tries to posture and break this, it actually makes it easier to get leverage on his knee to knock him down, and I can go for an ankle lock. Another situation like this, if I have an omoplata here and I start to underhook and he tries to rip out by posturing, I can use this to come up and go and chase the back. So it's very circumstantial when posture or when dropping your head is going to be beneficial or not. So certain principles like that, always trying to follow them, will actually confuse you more than help. So you have to be very particular in the situations you're relying on principles, and in the situations that you can, try to rely on pre-planned systems for situations that you know are going to occur. So some examples of principles or guidelines that are absolutely true are things like I have to take away distance to pass the guard. There is no guard pass that exists that ends with me like 1 meter away from his chest. Every guard pass is gonna have to end with me chest to chest at some point. So saying that I have to take away the distance will absolutely be true. But of course, there's gonna be times where I'm in the guard and to take away distance, I back up, clear a leg, and then retake it. So understanding that that is a rule or a thing in place will help guide you and come up with better decisions in situations where you don't know what to do. But again, you'll always need contextual understanding. Another big one is distance creates leverage. So if I'm in open guard and I want to create force by pulling on the collar, the closer I am to him, the easier it is for him to posture up, right? The further away I am, it's like trying to deadlift a bar that's really far. He can't posture up here. The only thing he can do is step closer to posture, right? And now he's closer, he can posture, or perhaps break the grip. But if I'm playing from my back, regardless of what grips I have, if I understand that and I don't know what to do, a lot of times just creating a little extra distance will make your attacks a lot stronger, make your hooks stronger, and different things like that. So again, I have to understand the specific situation, but that's a general principle that will be useful in a lot of situations. Another big idea to understand here when you're using principles is multiple principles will be at play at once. You may have a rule about the best way to stand to be in balance, but that rule doesn't necessarily apply at the same time as the best way to stand to not get ankle locked, or not get your back taken, or not get triangle choked. So that's why I always say the best is to systemize when you can, and when you're in situations that are too complex for the time being to be able to map out, it's much better to rely on principles or guidelines to make quick decisions real time in situations. And also guys, remember, if you're really enjoying the content, be sure to like and leave a comment to help support the channel. So the difficult thing is all of these real-time decisions have to be made extremely fast under pressure while sparring. And that's why, in my opinion, the best thing is to mix these different tools. However, like I said in the beginning, in my opinion, the strongest method is always systems. Systems will always give you confidence and save you time when making decisions. Of course, you can't always use them. As I said before, there's times when it's impossible to have a systemized answer, but if you spend a long time training, you can systemize most positions down to situations where you have a clean answer. And anyone who's trying to rely on purely principles to solve all their situations will always be at a huge disadvantage to people who've put the time in important positions. It doesn't matter if someone understands all these principles very deeply. If they're stuck in a position like double sleeve guard and a student has practiced it for a year and knows every combination from there, they're going to be so far behind. They can't help but get caught in all these easy to fall into little traps. If you look at high level chest, even the guys who are amazingly intuitive at chess, they study all the common openings, they know the common pitfalls, just because pragmatically those positions are going to occur all the time, so you might as well have a pre-planned answer. So the question is, what positions should you invest most of your time putting analytical breakdowns into? And those are, like I said in the beginning, endpoint positions. You know that getting into a single leg is going to happen often in a fight. You know that getting into a triangle is going to happen. Being on bottom of mount, being on top of mount. these are the positions that are calculable and really worth investing in. So always set some time aside in your week to pick these positions that you know are always going to come up and break them down. Once you get good at them, the bigger, broader stuff you can be a bit more intuitive with and use big principles to connect them together. If you take someone who has very little training, but you spent like 6 months mastering the single leg takedown so that if they got in on a single leg, they can put pretty much anyone down. If they play from their guard and you just say, keep the guy away, try to keep him in front of your legs, if at some point they see an opportunity to grab the guy's leg, they'll probably just be able to stand up. And as long as they've worked that position, they can put that guy down and get the sweep. But if you spend hundreds of hours trying to break down all these different complicated positions that we don't even know for sure what the best answer is, people are going to get confused. So focus on the things you can absolutely solve first, have systems for those, and the things that are a little bit more abstract, try to rely on the guidelines. Although eventually, if you had the world's most powerful supercomputer that could calculate everything that would happen with 2 human bodies fighting in a jiu-jitsu rule set in every single situation, there probably is an absolute best move that you could systemize. It's just that no one is capable of systemizing it. So therefore, we have to rely on principles until one day we can do that and we can download all jiu-jitsu knowledge like the Matrix. You will have to learn to both systemize things on the side and also learn how to use principles and intuition working together.